the Unconsumed podcast. I'm Lee Corning here with Mike McAnally, who goes by Mac, founder of RealSynch. Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mike is a Austin native, correct?
Correct.
And I'm learning things about Mike as we just sit around in the office here for a bit. You're also a musician.
Right, yeah.
What instrument?
So I'm a singer and guitar player.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been doing that since I was a kid.
How old?
So since I was about 11 years old.
Okay.
Went and asked for a guitar, found rock and roll, said I gotta have a guitar.
Who's your rock and roll hero then?
Good question. I was a big fan of still am a big fan of AC/DC. Right?
There you go.
So got turned on to AC/DC and it was over. After that, mom and dad never got much sleep.
Right. So you've been, and we'll get to the story here in a little bit, but it's good to know a little bit of the background on the guests we have here. So like where'd you go to school?
Yeah.
Any technical background or anything worth
like
preempting with the story?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Austin native, not many of us left.
Right.
And wound up going to school at UT.
Okay.
And started at UT for a couple of years and then decided I was going to take my musician skills and hit the road.
Okay.
And did for about a year. So I dropped out of school. So I'm going to go be a musician and hit the road. And turns out musicians don't make a lot of money.
Right.
Unless you're Madonna or AC/DC or something like that. I don't make much money. So returned to school.
Right.
And actually got an RTF degree.
What's that?
Radio, television, film.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, right.
You're the third or fourth one that's been on this podcast.
Right?
Yeah.
For all the good it did me, because in '96 when Ma Bell was breaking up, right? They were breaking up the phone companies and getting rid of the monopoly.
Ma Bell, what's that?
Ma Bell, like Southwestern Bell and Pacific Bell.
Gotcha.
All the telephone companies were getting broken up, right? So everybody that was forming companies was like, we're a phone company, long distance and local and internet and things.
I remember
like
that.
this.
It was like 1010, dial 1010 something. Is that the time?
Oh, yeah. Right around 96, 97, 98, everybody decided they were a phone company.
Right.
So I got in with one and really started learning telecom, and that turned into like 70-hour weeks and things like that. Right. And I was just like, no, I can't do this. It was more in the customer service and a little bit of databases, right? Kind of got my first real exposure to any real tech in the workplace.
Right.
And then I got hired on to work at a private company that was doing integration. They were integrating applications for different businesses.
Okay.
And they were like, do you have any experience? Like, a little bit of databases. But as it turned out, because from the time I was little, my mom bought these thick crossword puzzle books. And she would work all the crossword puzzles. Well, these things about every 2 pages would have a big logic problem.
Okay.
And so I would go pull these things out of the trash when she was done and work all the logic problems in it for fun. Well, it turns out that's all like computers and coding are, is just logic problems, right?
Interesting. How old were you for that?
Oh, I probably started that when I was 9 or 10.
Wow.
And, that was on top of the library sending me home and saying, he's read all the books, Miss McAnally. You're going to have to go buy him some. Right? So went through the entire Round Rock library. Actually grew up out in Round Rock outside of Boston.
Gotcha. So is that the real story, like the librarian sent you home because you read all the books?
I read all the books they would let me read. There were some adult books that they wouldn't give me access to, but they were like, he's read everything.
They stopped you short of Crime and Punishment?
Yeah. Somewhere along that line, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's very cool. So we have, this podcast tilts technically very often. And so I love to hear the story about how you actually picked up coding itself.
Yeah.
Because we'll get into the nuts and bolts of RealSynch, but there's a lot of people drawn to development by front end, and RealSynch deals with back end,
right?
And some front end too, I'm sure. Yeah. But it sounds like the value is really on the pipes.
It is.
So how did you get into that specific space?
Great question. So I mentioned that I joined up with a little private company that was doing integration utilities.
Right.
I worked in support there, and in 6 months, they were like, you're on backline support. And then like another 6 months, they're like, you're doing people's work for them. Let's form a services organization in the company and get paid for it. And within about 2 years of that, I was running the services organization, and we got bought by a public company.
Okay.
So a local company called Pervasive that was really big in databases.
Okay, that sounds familiar. And then they got picked up later on. Right?
That's right. So Pervasive was a public company. They bought this private company called Data Junction that I was working at.
Okay.
And I went over there and started running the professional services at Pervasive. Within a couple of years of that, I'd kind of had my run of services and was really more into product.
Mm-hmm.
And so I joined the product management team and was in that team for 6-7 years.
Gotcha.
Worked with a lot of the big players in the space, from Salesforce to Oracle and Intuit, SAP, that sort of thing, and some go-to-markets with some of those. So we were doing a lot of business in life sciences and financial services, media and entertainment, high-tech manufacturing. And let's see, probably, I want to say 2011, might have been 2012, Pervasive got bought by a private company. And I was really enjoying what I was doing, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall with the private company and where they wanted to push things. So, I'd been working for the Fortune 1000 and the enterprise space for a while there, like 15 years.
Right.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to go join a consulting firm and really, just keep working in this space, both in terms of integration, application and data integration, but also implementation of systems, right? Tuning systems to so that organizations can get the most out of them. Really turning the ROI volume knob up to 11, right?
You rock it. That's for sure.
That's right.
For those of you that don't recognize the Spinal Tap reference, go check that out. So does this bring you to Forefront then?
That's right.
Okay.
So Forefront is still really big in the Salesforce implementation space and in integration with all the big ERPs. Out there, and they focused again in the verticals that I was already aligned in, had a lot of insight into, and I worked there for about 4 years, about 3-4 years, and it was at that point that I kind of realized, you know what, I don't think I want to really do. I mean, I was enjoying it. There were enjoyable pieces about it, but I was really looking for something that I could call my own.
Right.
And I said, listened to my daddy when I was little, and he told me, real estate's always a great investment. So I figured, well, those people have money, and they might be willing to spend it. It turns out the skills that I have in terms of integration are something that the residential real estate industry has been yearning for nearly, like, ever since the technology boom in that ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
They moved from green sheets and old DOS, green screens and stuff, to all cloud and VR and AI and everything else.
So true. That has changed like on a dime.
It has. And they've leapfrogged, right? It's
Right.
not like they went to, okay, what's the next 8-year-old technology? They went onto the bleeding edge, right? When they switched, the whole thing pivoted. And so I really started, looking deeper into that industry and started collecting more relationships with brokers and vendors. In July of last year, 2017, was when I kind of started the research pattern and started recognizing, okay, this whole space is using the most primitive forms of integration possible.
Right.
And the enterprise space knows how to do it, but they've got millions, billions that they're spending on people and tools, which just isn't going to happen down in the SMB space, right? Especially in residential real estate, even though they've got plenty of bucks, that's not necessarily.
It's not made for them. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Brokerage, isn't looking to form up an IT team and build integrations all day long.
Right.
So, and then plus the vendors in the space, they'll do some point-to-point stuff, but for the most part, that's really just what's the least we can do to say that we have integration, right? Right. And then leave it like an old bridge for the next 5 or 6 years. Right. So the more I looked at it, the more I realized, okay, all the integration is really primitive and really limited. They go about 3 inches deep in terms of what you can do, and then they stop. And they go, okay, you got integration now. Well, cool. You get a name, you get an email, you get a phone. What you don't get is you don't know if a lead has slipped through the cracks.
Right.
You don't You don't have somebody monitoring and managing that stuff, right?
So how would you compare that to what the standard enterprise sales department for any company? I'm thinking software because that's where I'm from.
Sure.
But there's industrial equipment, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
How are those people tracking leads as opposed to residential real estate historically?
Yeah. So in the enterprise space, they have the same approach that residential realty wants to have, which is best of breed.
Right.
There are some organizations who go, oh, we're just an SAP organization, or we're Salesforce only, or whatever it may be. But for the most part, the ones that are winning end up with a best of breed topology or ecosystem of applications they're using on the front side, sometimes multiple CRMs depending on the lines of business. And they use some pretty expensive things called service buses and middleware and all kinds of technical terms that.
Yeah. So can you define what that is to the layman, because we're about teaching people what things are on the fly, right?
Sure. So a service bus or middleware is essentially a system that is basically starts off as a toolkit, and then developers get a hold of it and they implement the integrations, oftentimes real-time, bi-directional, very sort of aware and smart integrations that are, for instance, taking data from a lead gen application, funneling that into a CRM. There may be a bi-directional aspect to that, where as data is updated in the CRM, that data then gets posted back out to the lead gen or the marketing automation app or what have you.
Right. So in real estate, that's obviously done much differently.
Yeah. So in real estate, they tend to use, the first thing that comes up is what's called a mail parser, and that's an email parser.
Okay.
Parse means to cut things into, sort of structured pieces that they can then be imported into a system.
Right.
And so what all these vendors have is you can put in an email address into the system. This is where I want all my email notifications of leads to go. And that's basically just an email box that then parses the email and pushes the data into a system of record. Unfortunately, a lot of times those emails come out with nothing in them, or the formats have changed,
right,
or the parser's just not resilient to the types of data that get passed.
Yeah, so I've lived in data for a long time, and the finest little changes between data types can make for a whole mess of problems.
Absolutely.
And, in real estate, where the leads probably aren't as readily available, especially if you're smaller, those leads can be very valuable. So we had, can you pull up the RealSync.com, sync with an H? We had a chiropractor on, and he was saying that an auto accident on the highway, the Google AdWords for that is like $86 to be the one that they click on when there's an auto accident, or to be the lawyer that's clicked on. And so for a smaller realtor, like, those leads are tremendously important. So anything that slips through could be the big one, or could be the hot one.
That's right.
Or there could be the quick turn, right?
Well, and on the other side of that coin, in the big organizations and enterprise brokerage, somebody with 200 agents, their spend on leads is enormous, right? Because they've got to feed all those agents.
Yes.
So, to your point, whether they're big or small, I mean, the bigger they are, the more they're spending on leads to get that big. And so, to your point, even at the big side, any one of them could be the one that's going to be the next sale. Right? Yeah,
it's so hard to know, right? So it's like if you're let's say you're me and you live in enterprise software, and any lead that comes in, like, you can segment it out by size of group. And that would be like a pretty good way of saying, like, okay, if who's a big company? Who's number one in the Apple? If a lead for Apple comes in, like, we don't want to miss that. That's like very key.
Right.
If a lead for
Jim's Car Wash
comes in, that'll go into a bucket of entirely separate leads.
Yeah.
So that is, it's really interesting to look at these things from different industry perspectives. And so I was looking at your site earlier today, and scroll down to the part that says some of our partners.
Just a little bit.
Just a bit. So you guys have been live for a year and a half?
No. So another good question. So I started the research July of last year.
Okay, so that's where the year and a half comes from.
And spent about 5 to 6 months doing the research, gaining different relationships, building an advisory council. And then in December of 2017, we lit the fire and started building. May, we finished what our minimally valuable product that we're like, all right, we've got a product that can sell.
Yeah.
Right? It's got some value for folks. It doesn't have every bell and whistle that I want it to, but
the nature of the MVP,
that's
right?
right, exactly. And so May came and we did beta
Okay.
for a couple of months, and that is literally, the beta is wrapping up this week.
Okay, so you guys are pre-GA.
You were like the 10th of August, we are going to be fully GA. Beta has ended.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are you, do you have any pre-sales done or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we're seeing some of the partners here.
Right, because I was going to say,
short list, but
even if you've been GA for a year, GA stands for generally available. That's a pretty expansive list of the potential partners in the space that you could even have.
Yeah.
So how did you get that all so quickly?
So a couple of things. So I mentioned I spent 20 years in integration. So knowing what were the right back end products.
Spoke the language.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I didn't build everything from scratch. I've actually got partners in that space who said, "Hey Mac, you've got a great idea here. Let's go. Let's partner up with you and provide the heavy lifting stack in the backside with all the connectivity and cool transformational pieces." So we kind of had that ready to go, and then it was really just a matter of that 6 months I'd spent at different conferences and meeting people and gaining an advisory council gave me some great relationships to broker me into some of these groups. Some of them have open APIs, and you don't even have to contact them. You just go get a trial version, plug into the API. And having done integration for 20 years, I was able to, of course, pick out, this is the one that's going to be a problem. This one's got a great API. Mm-hmm. These guys don't have an API, so there may be some value to working with them, and enabling them in some ways. And this is what do we got here? 8. We're now at 15 partners.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, this 8 we got, I think we had the 8 in April. And so we've just continued building and forming up partnerships.
So I was looking at one other thing on your website, and it's the API indexes that you have. So all the big boys are in there. Where is that? Is that scroll up at them and then see if you can find APIs at the top there?
Partners, maybe. Is this our? Yeah. So there's some of the coming soons. I don't know if we had an API piece.
Maybe I'm misremembering it. It was off the. There was a kind of a pitch video on the site.
Oh yeah, it's on the FAQ page.
Yeah, we don't need to show it now, but one of the things I was thinking about this is bringing together all of those different data types and bringing them into one place so that you can be the pipes or be the middleware essentially for this. Is that something? And you don't need to hit play on there, but is that something that it has to just take tons of time to plug all these values in, right?
Yeah. Well, so
does it take a more complex team, or are you outsourcing any of this?
Yeah, good question. The team that I have is a nearshore team. They're actually down in Mexico, in Guadalajara.
Okay.
And none of them had any prior integration experience. And so I took a team at the beginning of December, and by January, they were starting to crank out integration. So I spent a little time down south of the border, right, working
Didn't
with
hate
these
it though,
guys.
right?
No, it was gorgeous. It was beautiful.
So you picked up the Topo Chico.
Yeah, picked up my new habit, exactly.
We picked that up in Austin, Texas, actually.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't get away from it in Austin. I had never bothered. I was like, that's something else. But then I was down there for weeks at a time, and it was inevitable. So yeah, they weren't integration guys when we started, but really fast learners, really dedicated, and had a great tool set. My back end partner that was already built with all the tools they would need to succeed, and me just kind of guiding as we went. One of the things that we do from a design perspective to both keep it simple for us and scalable for us, and to to reduce the friction in the setup process is we have what we call a common model. So if you think about a source and a target, my lead gen system, and I need to get my leads and the activities, digital activities they're performing. Right. I like this house. I shared this house.
So that's all the stuff that you get off like Zillow and Redfin?
Sure. I mean, any lead gen source you're using, right? Okay. Realtor.com, Zillow, Redfin. There's a whole slew of smaller players out there. The ones you mentioned are kind of the mountains in the business.
It shows you how much I know. I know the two that are giants.
Right. Yeah, but there's plenty of others out there doing great business. And so, with that, that sort of I've got to get leads and their activities from source to target. What we do is, because to your earlier point, they all describe data in different ways, use different data types, have different sources, or what status is this lead in? Every application has some call it warm, some call it hot, some call it strong.
Yeah, process driven stuff.
Right.
Yep. So
we created what's called a data schema, and it's just a description of the data that's going to be moving through your application. And we called it an RE common model, real estate common model. And what we do is when we take data from a source, we map it into this common model, this scheme. And then once it's in that schema, it can be mapped to any of the targets that we support. So it's kind of a mediation data model in the middle, so that we don't have to go point A to point X over here.
Because if you do that, you end up with one of those diagrams that's right,
hard-coded, point to point. Yes. It's a big spider spaghetti mess.
Yes, I could do with never seeing one of those again.
That's right.
When I was at IBM, we used to do IT optimization for data centers. Mm-hmm. And we would walk into these rooms. I'm thinking of one in particular where there was, if you've ever seen a movie where there's like a serial killer and he's like putting red yarn between all the pictures.
Oh, yeah. The serial killer wall.
Yes, it was a change management system, but it was all done on paper, and it was just layered on top of layering and layering. And so our job was to go in there and like refit all this to be
reverse engineer that into a system. Yeah.
And even the documents that we came back with were extremely complicated. It didn't solve the problem. It just put the problem in a cleaner box. That's another story. But like when you're selling RealSync, have you hired a sales staff, or what's the go-to-market plan here?
Yeah. So the nice thing about these partnerships that we formed up is they generally have a lot bigger marketing and sales teams than us.
Right.
But they really get what we're doing, and they value it, and they're more than willing to put some marketing and spend on it and get their salespeople trained, because that's just another great way to knock that objection out of their sales cycle.
So it's like a secondary model.
That's right. I mean, the channel partners for us are going to be a primary way to bring users in. Now, I do have a sales guy. I got a marketing guy. I got my team down in Guadalajara. But I'm also looking to grow that tribe.
Right.
That's one of the things that's really going to help push us up. So by the end of the year, I'll be adding a few more headcount to the team.
So if I'm thinking about this, and like I said, I'm new to this space, so like we can talk to it like I'm 7. Is if you were pitching RealSync to me as a broker or a real estate agent, how would you do that?
Sure. So RealSync is, I think you mentioned before, sort of the plumbing under the kitchen sink.
Right.
But of course, your stainless steel sink is no good without the plumbing under it, right? So, or it's of limited value anyhow.
It looks nice.
It looks really nice. And so I kind of pitch it that way: is it's the plumbing that right now you're using straws and gum and duct tape to like move data between your lead gen systems and your CRMs. And you've got your agents, if you're the broker, you've got agents that are logging into these lead gen systems, copying, pasting data, and putting it into your CRM. And I got to say it, salespeople aren't known for their immaculate data entry skills or
Guilty.
consistency.
Yeah.
So what it becomes is there's really two pieces to it. One is, because the data that's in those lead gen systems gets flushed in real time,
right?
I haven't seen more than about 30-second latency on any of these into the CRM, along with the activities. Nobody's ever logging into that system. It gets set up, it does its job, they stay focused in the CRM. But one of the keys there is the speed to lead. So in residential real estate, you got these stats that say if you can be the first agent to contact somebody that's looking around, if you can be number one or be there within the first 2 minutes, you've just increased your chances of turning that into a sale by like some ungodly number. Right.
Well, it's huge, right? Because when I'm clicking around on the internet looking for a house or a condo or even an apartment, it's who calls me, it's who contacts me first, especially if I'm looking at like, let's say it's 6 p.m. because that's when you'd be looking at houses, or maybe later on. And then maybe I click something that I like and I get an email saying, hey, would you like to see it?
Yeah.
I'm in that moment, I'm ready to be like, yeah, I'll go see it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if you call me tomorrow, I might be busy or something.
Yeah, I'm going to be, my head's somewhere else. Right?
Exactly.
So it's that speed to lead. And what they find, and then what they don't have today is the context around that lead.
Right.
So the activities they've undertaken, like, I'm going to save a search for 4 3s in Georgetown, under $1 million.
What's 4 3s?
4 bedroom, 3 bath.
Okay, gotcha.
In Georgetown, under $1 million. You know, my criteria, right? Needs to have a pool, close to the golf course, whatever it is. That saved search can be awesome context for that conversation with the lead.
Right.
What properties they've favorited or shared with their spouse, perhaps. Any property they've asked for more info on, or clicked the I want to see this property. Having all that at your fingertips in the CRM at the same time that you're picking up the phone to call that lead or to text them or email them, which is also happening a lot. You start getting a lot more text. That context now starts coming in the CRM. You can have a much more a much more engaging conversation with that lead. And what the studies have shown is that actually also raises your conversion rate on those leads. Okay. If you can have a more engaged conversation and not just be like, I'm an agent, I can help you find a house. Greatly, go sniff around somewhere else, right? But if you've actually got some context on what I'm looking for and some insight on that, you've now raised your opportunity and your chances for actually converting on that lead.
What's your response to someone that might say there's so many real estate tools out there?
There are.
Because like I was telling you earlier, like I spin up things all the time, and there's probably a million of me, and half of that, or not, let's say 10% of them want to create real estate driven apps. That's one of the 9 technical sectors, right? So that would stand to reason to say that there's 100,000-ish real estate apps. So what do you say to those people that say it's inundated market? What are you doing?
I say, come on, you're another integration point in the ecosystem.
So it's welcome. That's like fuel for the fire.
That's right. From my side, it just exacerbates the issue I'm trying to solve. So great, all comers, right? At the same time, I would also suggest that they go ahead and invest in having an API, because having an app that you can't integrate with anything puts you on an island. Well,
you either have to have the greatest sales force on the planet and be able to rip and replace everything there is, or you can play nice, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess the other thing I would say, and this goes not only to those maybe getting into the space, but those in the space, what you see a lot of is they came out with a great lead gen application, and they collected a bunch of users, and the users are raving about it. And a few users say, if you guys had a CRM, I'd use that too. And so then they start fragmenting and fracturing their focus, and they go, oh, we need to be a CRM too. And then a couple people go, well, if you did transaction management, I might look at that too. And so they end up...
Big temptation to get wide.
Yeah, to go wide. And what you find is they really fracture their focus. They don't do the other things as well as what they did. Some of them even try and go, oh, our differentiator is integration. It's like, well, it turns out you're not an integration company either. You're just a really good CRM company.
Right.
And so I guess my message would be stay in your lane and turn what you do up to 11. Blow your users' minds with new features every quarter that really speak to what they want. Stop trying to go be something else. And because in this market, the profile brokers, teams, agents they tend to want the latest tech that's really going to speak to them. The things that they hear their coach, their broker says, I'm winning with this. This is really, getting us some ROI. They want to go pick that up. And so they have no qualms about leaving one system and going to another.
Okay.
But then they've got to move the data, and then they've got to integrate the data in that new system.
Yes.
So you start, creating problems. As you're solving problems, you're creating more problems in your wake. So
Absolutely.
Having something that you've kind of got a Swiss Army knife for, okay, I want to move over to that app. Cool. Does RealSync have a connection for that? Yes, it does. All right, cool. And if I move over to that app, I can still connect all my lead gen and marketing automation into this new CRM I'm going to, for instance.
Okay, very cool. So let's shift into like the entrepreneurial bug that you identified after your time in the last consulting practice. Yeah. So one of the things I found out this week that our viewing demographic for YouTube only, because this is where I get good stats, 79% male between the ages of 24 and 35. So this, YouTube is, from what I understand, primarily a male domain. So that doesn't necessarily mean that more men are interested in this than women, but it does harken to a time in your life when you were like trying to figure things out, like what can I actually do? How can I strike out on my own? How can I practically address something that I don't necessarily know how to do yet? So you hit the real estate, and one of the things I was really interested in talking to you about is that you selected real estate to be the area that you addressed, and then unless I'm missing something, no real estate experience in the background, but the middleware experience. So why'd you pick that space?
Right. So there are a couple of questions in there, a couple of aspects to it. So why I picked real estate is, as I mentioned, the technology ecosystem boom in real estate.
Right.
And so that attracted me immediately. When you look at a lot of the other industries out there, they're not going through a technology ecosystem boom. They have their standby players, and there's not a lot of innovation going on. There are some in some other sectors, but it was also about looking at what the acquisitions of technology apps in the sector were going for.
Okay.
So when you start looking at, this app was around for 3 years and then got sold for $300 million to Fidelity or to Compass or KW or one of these, big boys. It's like, okay, well, there's also a pretty nifty looking exit strategy on the other side in residential realty. So those are a couple of things that attracted me to it. But, backing off to what got me to decide I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to go into business for myself, right?
Before we get there, real quick.
Okay,
So there's data is proliferated. And if you've ever sat in front of any salesperson's slide deck when they walk in your office, they have that one slide that has like all the different social networking sites, and it says there's a data explosion, and the next slide invariably is a J-curve chart in the production of human data over the past 5 years, 10 years, or something like that. Yeah. There's data everywhere. So if I'm looking at RealSync and you're being the plumbing for so many
underserved.
That's technically true, but what I was thinking of is you can be the plumbing between systems. And I saw Salesforce.com on there, and I saw Contactually, and those are like, from what I understand, the SMB versus the enterprise level CRMs. And so what's to stop this plumbing from being applicable to another industry?
Nothing. That's right. So now I'm a big guy on focus, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go wide and try and conquer a bunch of verticals.
You're going to stay in your lane? Is that what you're
mentioning? Right. That's right. So, but having said that, once this line of business is proved out, we see the traction in it, then there's, and in fact, I'm the CEO, I'm the founder, but ultimately that's not what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a product vision guy and go spin up the next really cool product in another industry or the same industry, but commercial real estate has the same problem.
Yeah.
Mortgage and title in this industry. Even just tangentially to residential real estate, you've got a lot of opportunity for integration to really make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, integration is one of the biggest problems with everything. Like I was mentioning before, the front end is something that everyone's attracted to, but the pipes in are what makes the difference. And so, hearing the story, I'm like, well, you could do that for social data. You could do that for retail, online e-commerce data. You could do that very easily for lead conversion, for any selling anything on a website, right?
Yeah. I mean, the enterprise guys have already figured this out, right? I mean, that's why they have integration.
Yeah, so they have and they haven't.
Because of the big data. Well, so integration is the foundational, fundamental thing, or piece of your system that ends up enabling all the innovation, the business intelligence, the predictive analytics, the big data. None of it goes anywhere. Nothing happens with it without integration. Right. If you can't get it from systems A and B and C and through Z into your data warehouse, your big data pool, your predictive analytics system, then those things aren't worth anything without all the data, right? It's been mediated, standardized, and brought into the platform. So the enterprise sector gets it. They don't always execute on it perfectly.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning.
But they do get it from a strategy standpoint. And the vendors in this space get it to a certain degree, but they keep making it the redheaded stepchild instead of really giving it first-class citizen, like, this is how we get to all the cool innovations that you all want, is by integration. They've kind of left it, under the stairs and growing whiskers and losing teeth.
Under the stairs. That's way underutilized. That's an underserved cliche.
They're there for a reason.
Perfect. So it was. I stopped you on the reason for getting into this entrepreneurial endeavor, because this is not something that people are generally willing to walk away from a stable job for, or willing to moonlight for. So tell me about that decision-making process.
So 2 main parts to it. The first is more about me personally and where I came through, right? So I forgot to mention I did go back to school and finish school. But and every time I took a job, I found myself being asked, hey, could you go do this job? Could you go take another step up the ladder, or go form this team, or go transform this part of the organization, or what have you. And so I've always been able to do it. And it wasn't because I had the confidence. It was kind of the old cliche of fake it till you make it, right? So I had just enough confidence, or at least looked like I had enough confidence. And then I'd get in there and try it. And sure enough, and this is, I certainly don't take credit for it, but I've had a knack for building good teams and keeping them together. My motto is, if you take care of your people, they will take care of your customers, and your customers will take care of your business and make your business.
Yeah, there's
strong,
a flywheel.
Right? So I certainly don't I'm not waving the Mac flag here, because I had good people in all those cases.
Hey, we can wave it if you're interested.
But ultimately, what I found was I was being asked to do these things because I didn't think like other people in the organization. I didn't know what couldn't be done. I would just go out and do it, and then do something that everybody had thought, like, well, that seemed impossible last year. Well, Mac just did it. Clearly it's not. Let's go do some more of that, right? And so that's always been sort of driving me to the next place in my career. And even when I got into consulting and started working at Forefront, it was a matter of, hey, we keep doing all of our projects in this waterfall style, where we get all the requirements, we do all the design and all the build. You know what this means, and any of your tech viewers will. And I said, hey, by the way, guys, you're a little behind the times. There's this thing called Agile, where you do this iterative development and got this circle where you keep improving it. So I formed up their Agile practice, and business took off. Every customer that we came in contact with was like, we need an Agile transformation. And so that would end up getting partnered along with the systems implementation, and application integration was also do an Agile transformation for us. And then it became, well, there's this whole quality assurance piece. And so I would keep forming up practices within Forefront that felt like little companies that I was starting within, and it wasn't a big company. I mean, we had like 50 people, right? But it would be a matter of, okay, form up this practice and we give you some people, and then you kind of stand that up and get that going. And now could you go do that over here in this area of the practice? So that kept
they have to ask in that nice tone, because that's not something people are willing to do all the time.
That's not. And when you've got somebody that you can see that can do it, and you've seen their track record of it, you kind of don't want to, shake the baby, if you will. And so I did that a couple of times, and man, the last one, you mentioned IBM a little while ago, and right before I was kind of contemplating and looking at the space and going, do I want to quit my cushy, secure job and form up a company and be a startup, and half or more than half of startups fail, they're done in the first year.
Almost all of them.
Yeah. Way more than half. I was being generous there.
Yeah.
IBM was talking to Forefront about, hey, we're doing this great stuff with Watson and we want to integrate HR data from all these ERPs. And Forefront turned to me and said, do you want to head up this practice? And so it was really kind of a hard decision, because that was going to be a nice big step up and a much closer relationship with IBM than I'd had in the past. And Watson, oh my God, right?
Right.
But at the same time, I was starting to get the bug for, I've been doing this for other people for 20 years. Yeah. I wonder if there's some way I could do this for myself. If I could get in the captain's chair and be Captain Kirk, right? And like be calling the shots. I just need a great team around me. And so that kept sort of coming back up to me. And the more I started looking at what are the industries that are really suffering from integration, because I've been working in life sciences and financial services, and they don't always execute on it, but they've got the strategy and they get it, and they certainly have the money, but they didn't always have the need in the way that the SMB space does, right? Mm-hmm. In these larger organizations, they end up making it happen hook by crook, because they've just got enough people and enough dollars to do it, and they can waste dollars that way if they need to. In a 20 agent brokerage or 20 agent team, or even a 50 or 100 agent brokerage, they don't necessarily have thousands and thousands of dollars to be dropping on something that, while it's going to raise the top line and push down expenses and operationally make them more effective, they don't always have tons of money for it, right?
You can really move the needle at an SMB, is what I've found over time.
That's right. If you can provide them some level of scale on the top and bottom line, that's really what any SMB is looking to do. They're looking to grow to the next level. Right. And the next level is put away your pointy sticks and open fires, and let's go get you guys, a pan and a grill, and let's cook our food. Right? I'm terrible at analogies.
No, I think some of these are great.
But I kind of felt like Prometheus coming down from the mountain with fire, like, hey, let's cook this stuff. It'll, it might not make us sick if we do it this way. Mm-hmm. And what it really does is it allows them to grow and get to the next level, right? To add more agents, to be able to go, hey, we don't have to be scared every time we're thinking about taking on a new app. If it does what we think it does, and we can integrate it with our other systems, then that gives us a clear path, right? And so that's actually been, really resonating with the brokers that I've worked with on my advisory council. And you mentioned Salesforce before. One of the first ones I was working with is a fellow named Chris Waters here in Austin. Mm-hmm. He's on billboards and radio and has television commercials, and he's doing a bunch of spend on the front side. But he's also got a wall of shame of about 15 or 16 different applications he uses to do that.
Right.
Plus a pretty big Salesforce organization, right? I think he was spending quite a bit on it.
What do you mean Salesforce organization, as in humans or
the application?
Install, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so worked with him initially to kind of get to know the space a little bit. And he was working on Salesforce, and he's like, Mac, hardly anybody uses Salesforce in this space. They're all using stuff that's pre-built for residential real estate.
Right.
So he's kind of a maverick in that way. I like that. And I've done a lot. I mean, I've been working with the Salesforce application since version 1. I would get a URL to an Oracle database on some server farm somewhere, and that was how I connected to Salesforce and integrated with it.
What version are they on now?
or they're in. I mean, now they go by the year. They don't even have like a version anymore. It's like the fall 18 release. They don't even bother with versions. This was literally when it was not quite cloud tenant. It was cloud-ish.
Yeah.
And to connect to it, like I said, these guys are bitter rivals with Oracle, but in the beginning they were using Oracle databases on the back end to house all the data, and that's how we integrated with them.
Yeah, that has been a competition worth reading the headlines on, because if you look at some of these companies, like Oracle could have stopped Salesforce from existing in the same way that IBM could have kept Oracle from existing, or Oracle could have kept VMware from existing. It's like these guys are all cyclical, and you can miss these chances, but you can't chase everything too.
That's right.
It's the same thing, and that's the ultimate answer on how that gets the way it is, right?
It does. It goes back to that focus, and to your point, there is a certain amount of co-opetition that goes on in any of these industries,
Yeah.
and especially with the bigger players. They compete fiercely, but at the same time, they're in it to make money. So if there's some little partnership that can go on there to help drive revenues, and oftentimes it's a little more short-term gain. It's not some long-term strategy, because you're kind of placing bets, right? You don't know which of these partners you're working with might turn out to be the next Amazon or the next Oracle, or what have you.
Yeah, it's impossible to know, and it's impossible to see which way the market's going to go, because there's new stuff coming out all the time. One thing I wanted to ask you about is what is next for RealSync. So you've got beta going live on the 10th. That's huge. You've got all the pre-sales done. You've got all these APIs cut, all the integrations, all the partners. What, in terms of the focus that we're talking about, what is V2 look like for RealSync?
Yeah, good question. I mentioned there was two parts to how I got here. And the second part was, once I decided to do it, was able to gather up $1 million in seed funding immediately to get it off the ground.
Great.
And so was
that family friends, or was that VC?
No, that was folks in the space.
Okay.
And it was really just a couple of them. They were like, "No, we totally get this. We've needed it for years. Where have you been?"
So these are potential customers.
Well, they're already customers, but they saw what we were doing. It was like, no, let me seed fund this, right?
Yeah.
So we still got some of that to work with as we're starting to build up revenue. And so what we're going to do with what we have, and of course we're doing another round, right? Another angel round, and getting good feedback in the industry from that. So where we're headed with this is, right now we're focused on the front of the funnel, right? All lead gen, marketing automation, CRM. Great place to create a great problem. Oh my God, we're so much winning out there. But the office managers, the transaction coordinators, I don't know the last time you bought a house, but there's a lot of different steps. And
I got this one 4 months ago.
There you go. And you probably had somebody other than your agent helping you through the transaction and all the pieces that need to be signed. And this has to happen by the end of the month. Is this paper?
That is a box of quarters. You're just
Awesome.
fine. Don't worry about it.
It's safe. That will then create that problem on the back end. And so we'll start focusing on the latter half of the funnel, which is integrating CRMs with transaction management applications, with financial and accounting applications. But that's really just sort of the last chapter of the first book. The next book, the version 2, I don't want to give too much of it away, but enough to say, I mentioned that integration is the foundation upon which all these innovations reside. One of the first things I found in going into this industry is they can't see more than about 6 weeks in front of their face, because it takes about 6 weeks to close on a house. So in terms of forecasting for an SMB, 6 weeks is about as far as they get on forecasting. And if they want to get further than that, they've got to go cobble together data from multiple applications, correlate it with their CRM, and by the time they get the number out, the number's no good anymore. Right?
Yeah.
They're already 4 weeks into a 2-month forecast that they were like, we're going to have a 2-month forecast. Well, now it's only a 30-day forecast.
Right.
Right. So once we've got all this pipe laid and we've got the data flowing between integrations, tapping into those pipes to then create a business intelligence dashboard.
Okay.
Which is the stainless steel sinks, the granite countertops, right? To our analogy, is the front end UI piece that everybody wants to see. That's where we'll be headed next, because I was really surprised to find out there's nobody in the space doing deep integration, really smart integration. It's always very shallow, limited integration. There's also nobody doing like great business intelligence and dashboard reporting. The solutions you have out there are manually enter your data into our system so that we can give you dashboard reports.
Well, so I used to work for Tableau, and what
mentioned that before.
Tableau would say is, give us your data, we'll spin off any visual you want.
Yeah, the give us your data is the piece, right?
So are you saying they don't have the data?
Well, no,
or they don't have it.
Tableau never has the data. They have to have it given to them. They'll have some middleware pipe it to them. They may use imports, exports. They may use raw files, whatever. And so in the residential realty space, they've got the same problem, right? And there's apps out there that sit there and go, give us the data, we'll present it and visualize it any way you want.
Right, and there's bunches of them.
But none of their customers know how to get them that data in any timely fashion. And it's certainly not going to come in real time so that you can look at your dashboard app that morning and then look at it again in the afternoon or at lunch and see the meter, turning and that sort of thing, because it's all about export files and very manual processes, batch things. And oftentimes there's just no way to get the data out of the various applications that you're dealing with, other than maybe like an export or even a screen scraper. So beyond just the pipes that we're laying with RealSync, we'll also be able to do some things like screen scrapes, because there's data that's not available in some of those APIs. So we'll have to go through and do some aggregates and some scraping and things like that. But to then be able to bring together the kinds of key performance indicators that are really going to tell a brokerage where their business, based on the data, not on somebody's gut feel, we're going to make that number, but based on the data, number of calls, number of appointments, right? These types of indicators can then tell them where they're likely to be in the next 6 months. And do we need to pick it up now? Do we need to hire 10 more agents this month if we want to be at number X by the end of the year? That kind of insight can be really powerful to folks that have just been kind of swinging in the dark with their best instincts for years.
Right. Yeah, it's the case. And so when you bring up the idea of like forecasting, I never thought of it in such a way where a real estate office could only see 6 months out or 6 weeks out. Yeah. 6 months would be great. And you're on the case, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
And is there a direct correlation to how many agents they hire to how many houses they can sell?
Yeah, so in the big ones, they're not in the business of selling houses anymore. They're in the business of hiring agents.
Okay.
So it's become a whole different industry. The KWs, the Remaxes, the Sotheby's, Real Estate, Century 21. They don't care about selling houses, because they know if they hire enough agents, the houses will turn and they get a piece of all that. Yeah. So the industry has shifted in some weird ways, where the big boys are like, we know you're going to sell houses. We just need an army of you that we can get that, we can death by 1,000 cuts, get, 0.5% out of each of you. And that's how we keep the big wheels rolling.
That is so counterintuitive to how I would address that, but I guess that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
Real estate has been, and you can tell me what you think about this. Real estate has been ripe for disruption for so long, and it won't be disrupted by virtue of lobbies, right?
No.
So is there any circumstance in which MLS, which stands for something
multiple listing service,
listing service, would ever open up to pure?
You've touched on one of the near religious philosophies, right. So the MLSs think they own the data, and the agents are like, no, we own the data. And so you've got these two factions that are just like, No, it's our data. And so you were asking, well, the MLS is going to open up. I mean, you've got some pretty big players out there trying to consolidate and aggregate and go out and sign with every MLS to be able to aggregate their data and provide it to any of these big brokerages out there.
And who would they be?
You got folks like, you would ask me to name names.
Oh, if you don't have them on the tip of your tongue, it's no problem.
I'm thinking of like, there's one called Core, there's one called Matrix, there's one called Flex. There's a couple of different systems and they tend to be a little bit more regional. Mm-hmm. You'll have one that's like working the North Atlantic all the way down to Georgia, and they've got every MLS between Georgia and Maine, and they aggregate those, and then you pay a subscription fee to access those MLSs.
So who do you think owns the data? Is it the real estate agent or is it the MLS? Or is that a political question which you shouldn't answer?
It's somewhat political. I try not to come down on either side of it because, honestly, I don't have a dog in that race. We're not actually going after MLS. MLS is not something we want to integrate. There's folks that have been at it for years.
Right.
I'm trying to come into a space where there's really no competitor out there. The competitors are very shallow in terms of what they do, and they tend to fragment themselves and try and attack 70 different industries. Like, great, you're either super primitive or you've got your head elsewhere. Cool, I'm gonna go really deep just for this industry and stay in my lane. And that lane doesn't include MLSs and what it really does, where we're really trying to be, is to give freedom in terms of a selection to brokers and teams and agents, to give them the freedom to whatever app you want to use, whatever is the best of breed app for your business and it's going to take you to the next level. Let's help you turn up the volume on that and really get the most out of it. And if you need to switch to another one, then we got integration there as well. So we see ourselves as a bit of a disruptor in that way, but really just more like there wasn't a huge barrier given the products and the experience that I can bring and the advisory council that I have that really knows what's the most valuable, smartest integrations to offer, that there wasn't a big barrier there. Now, I will say residential realty is not prepared for somebody like Amazon to sweep in and go, there's now an Amazon brokerage division and we're selling, peanuts and shoes and houses, right? They're not ready for that. And Redfin, you mentioned before, is kind of the agentless play in the market. They give you like a half a point off of your transaction because there's no agent involved. Mm-hmm. You do all the shopping online. Redfin handles the whole thing electronically.
They just so happen to be next door to Amazon in Seattle out there.
Yeah. So you can imagine though, Amazon's getting some ideas.
Yeah, they had a talk.
Looking interesting. Yeah. So this industry is not ready for Amazon to swoop in because it will literally demolish many of the vendors in this space.
Interesting.
Because they don't play well together. The consumer and the agents and teams and brokers can see all the gaps in the systems and where they don't connect and where the systems are holding them back. And when Amazon, somebody like an Amazon or other, comes in with fully integrated platforms where everything can talk to one another and they're best of breed, and they've got an API that's like, we've got Amazon Web Services, open API to our platform. Any of the tools that you want to use out there can plug into our system pretty readily.
Yeah.
And Amazon's got the resources to build out to those systems if they had to. This industry is not ready for something like this. But if they have integration in place, if they're able to use any of the best systems that they can use, and there are no gaps and drops between customer and agent and onto transaction, then they're going to be strong enough to weather it. So I'm hoping that this mission from God, as Jake and Elwood would say, is really going to resonate. And I'm finding it with the vendors I talk to. Now I haven't climbed Mount Zillow yet, right? But my sense is that the more of them that I talk to, the more they see that integration is going to be not only the thing that enables innovation, but also sort of puts up the walls around the city, right? And says, no, we're strong enough to withstand the storm.
Yeah, and that's a great call because Amazon has come to to the walls of a ton of different industries and shaking things to the roots. And so if you're looking at an industry and you're wanting to be, CNBC calls it Amazon proof, you do have to give ultimate freedom to the existing vendors so that the existing industry can choose the best of breed tools so that they don't get swooped in and get the rug pulled out from them.
Right, because they're looking over here at how can we be a CRM as well? It's like, guess what? You're nothing now.
Yeah, 2 things is now 0 things for sure.
That's right.
And so I love the focus play. It's a great story. It's just starting too. Is the beautiful thing.
Yeah, we're early on.
Yeah, man. So I got a shot out of the cannon for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a question I used to love to ask. I used to love to ask earlier on in the podcast is, if I took all this stuff away from you, and I took, let's say I got your house, I have your car, and Mike McAnally is in Austin, Texas, with nothing. What's your plan to like re-climb the summit that you're working on right now?
I'd probably just grab my guitar and hit the road.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, I took your guitar then, too. Go to the pawn store, see if you can't work your shoes in and do a deal.
Right back to college. You're just going to hit the road and do nothing. No.
So that dream's still alive, too, then?
It is. I mean, I've got 2 bands right now that I front.
Do you?
Yeah, so I've got a 4-piece rock band, my buddies that, we still write music, and we only play 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay.
But I love doing that. And then my wife is also a singer and a drummer, and so we have a little 2-piece thing that we do. And
your wife's a drummer. All
she's a drummer, she's a singer, she's a keyboardist. This woman can pick up anything and just run with it. Now, she's not a big fan of computers and IT, so I can't bring her in that way. But everything else she sets her mind to, it just gets done. So I don't know. I might just ride her coattails for a while.
Hey, not a bad plan.
Flip the script, as it were.
That's one of my favorite answers to that question. Just ride the coattails. All right, game on, man. So do you have kids?
I do. I've got a 16 and a 14-year-old boy.
Okay, so they're old enough to fend for themselves in this.
Yeah. They're like 90% attitude and 10% acne, and you just kind of let them be and do their thing. Try and embarrass them as often as you can.
Yeah.
And that fulfills the dad role.
Oh, good for you, man. That's beautiful. So, last thing is, we've talked about what's next for RealSync. If in version, we'll call it 1.1 and then 2.0.
Yeah.
When you're looking at way into the future, if you're looking at what's next after, like, AI is coming into focus and everyone's talking about that, and 20 minutes ago it was big data, and 20 minutes before that it was
virtual reality and
cloud and drones and VR, all these things. What do you see as someone that's, and I'm asking you this question specifically because you're the guy that deals with the pipes of all these things. What are we on the precipice of in terms of the next thing after? Put me 10 years out.
Sure. So there are a lot of factors in it. If some of the trends that we're seeing now hold steady, I don't think we're going to see the agent go the way of the dodo. That's the first thing.
Okay.
A lot of folks will say 10 years out there won't be any agents. People will just be on their tablets clicking and go
buying houses like things on Amazon.
Yeah. Add house to cart, right? And you hear some of that.
That's a good picture.
But for most of us, buying a home is the largest transaction we'll ever do in our lives, right?
Right.
For most of us, and doing that without a Sherpa to get you up the mountain is just asking for trouble. So I see the agents that are truly experts and in their region, so that the neighborhood agent who is like, I work this neighborhood up and down. Every house that gets bought and sold in this neighborhood is mine.
Goes through me, the real estate mafia.
That's right. I see that being the really, a really strong position. But I don't see agents going away. From a technical standpoint, like what's the next VR, big data, what have you. The couple of things that I like are One, I think the virtual assistant is going to get a lot stronger because, as I mentioned before, great agents are great relationship people. They're not necessarily going to remember to enter this data or what have you. And so the virtual assistants and I don't mean like a virtual assistant off in the Philippines. I mean like Alexa is a virtual assistant, right? Where she says, "Hey, I noticed you just wrapped up a meeting with." Sorry about that. Yeah, she's listening, isn't she? She's
listens.
Always listening.
We got in a fight the other day. It wasn't pretty. I had to go and delete the cards off the application.
Yeah,
I don't want you to remember that I said that.
She's probably already hidden that up in some memory bank.
Let's be honest,
right? But being able to say, "Hey," that rather than asking her or whoever your virtual assistant may be, "Hey, can you do this for me?" She's piping up and going, "Hey, sorry, you just wrapped up that meeting. Is this one that you want to, go ahead and close on, or do we need to update the status
into
a
pipeline or something like that?"
That's right. So you're no longer grabbing a mobile app and going in there and trying to change the status or add them to a campaign. You just say, "Kelly, add Lee to my watch list. He's not ready to buy yet, but I want to put him on a campaign and put in a reminder for me to touch base with him in 90 days. All right, Mac, done.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't get out your mobile app or anything. You're just talking to her and she takes care of it. The next step beyond that, I think, and part of that will be the predictive piece where she starts seeing your, I say she, the assistant.
Suri, Cortana, they're all
That's
females, right?
They're always females. We need a male virtual assistant, don't we?
You know what's super funny is that I have lined up for this podcast the head of business development for Soul Machines. Have you ever heard of this? It's a Suri / Cortana like device, but it's an actual person's face and it moves and reacts to what you're saying. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing because it's like I bought this Amazon device that talks. I'm not going to say her name again because I feel like this is next too. And I want to be on the cutting edge. Like I had the Palm Pilot and then I had the Windows Phone. It was the next piece.
And you had them both for a while.
Which way do I go? And then obviously, some game changers came down that court too. So I'm like, I'm thinking that that is the next big thing.
It is, and once they're able to recognize the patterns, it really will be like, hey, here's what you did the last time you had an appointment where you went woohoo. Was you wanted to close
the wake word is woohoo.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key word. So she listens and goes, so you want me to mark that one as closed and move it on to transaction coordination? Yeah, Kelly, go do it, So I think there'll be some pattern matching, some machine learning that'll feed into that. And we'll get away from our mobile apps and really start talking to our devices, right? And just having those conversations.
Yeah.
And they'll be picking up on our patterns and habits and the things that they do. And that starts leaning into one of the other things I think will be really big is everybody talks about predictive analytics where, start predicting what happens, and I think that's becoming more and more sophisticated.
That's been getting more sophisticated for like 15 years now.
Right, but what they haven't quite gotten to is prescriptive analytics.
Okay, so can you define the difference?
Sure. So predictive is just like it sounds. We're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. You then layer on prescriptive, and we're going to prescribe some actions that you can
tell
take
you what you should do
to either ensure that predictive piece happens, or to ensure that the prediction that was made about, hey, this is going to tank, that we can avoid that, right? And take the right kind of steps. So I think the next piece of analytics is going to be more prescriptive, layered on top of the predictions. So not only we tell you what we think is going to happen, but the machines are now telling you, here's what you should do to either ensure that happens or ensure that doesn't happen.
Now, can we have predictive inform prescriptive and then just have the digital assistant do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's where we're all headed. I mean, big surprise, we're all going to be outdated here in about 20 years.
Yeah.
Skynet and the machines take over, but on some level they're not learning without us to teach, right? And so as we start pivoting and changing our patterns and finding that, hey, that's that prescription didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. Then they learn from that, and they can't do that without humans, right?
Yeah. So I spent some time on this actually about a week ago, and what the prescription is a hotly contested topic right now, because the prescription comes from someone, like you're saying, without us to teach the machines what to say. And what happens is you have a person that has their own ideas and beliefs and understanding of the world, telling the machine what to tell other people to do. So it multiplies that ideology throughout whoever's willing to listen, or whoever's willing to trust the digital assistant tell them what to do.
Right. Well, that's why big data and data science is getting so big, because what they're trying to do with the machine learning and the big data and the science around it is really create correlations and then play out the predictions and the prescriptions that would go with them in a virtual, in the background, and crunch the 72,000 different ways this can play out, and then just give you a weighted outcome. Okay, 57% certainty that if you do X, Y, and Z, ABC will happen within the next 3 years. Now, it's still going to be, a bit of a roll of the dice, because there are factors that can't be brought into that statistical universe, right? But the more computing power, the more lessons that the machines have to learn from, the more the larger the data set, the more correlations they can make, and quite honestly, it becomes less about what a human taught the machine. The human kind of gave them the ABCs and the grammar, right? Then it's up to the computer, then it's up to the machines to really start doing the correlations. And ultimately, these are just going to be prescriptions. It's just like the doctor saying, take this, it's going to help. No, it's going to turn me into a zombie. I'm not going to take that, right? You try it for a week and you're like, I don't feel like me anymore. Let's put that away. So the prescriptions are only going to be as good as the results that they get.
Right.
And when prescriptions don't get results, that goes back into the system. That prescription didn't work out, and that starts teaching the machine again, right? So you get the real live reality feedback as the mechanism, rather than the next Jobs or Ellis or whoever who just has a certain way of thinking.
Yeah, I look at that situation, and one of the things that's I think about this constantly is, not constantly, but regularly enough, where if I'm being told to do something by a machine that was informed by a person, and I'm playing that ideological echo chamber type of thing, and then there's all sorts of interests, and so like you don't have to look any further than like the most local legislature that you can find to not find like people that want certain outcomes. And as a statistician, I can look at a data set and make it say a lot of different things, and you can guarantee that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that'll be programmed in to this machine that's making the prescriptions, and there will be no one area where there's like, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, and you'll have this convoluted data sets, and then they might all be in the same format. Maybe we get there 20 years from now, but I'm just like, I'm constantly perplexed by this.
You have to include the feedback mechanism that I mentioned a moment ago. So, somebody with a certain ideology, informed the beginning.
Maybe ideology is too strong. Like just any belief system.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think this.
Any agenda.
Sure. Conventional wisdom says X, and so we'll teach it X.
Or futuristic wisdom that's not here says X.
That's right. But ultimately, the machines never go farther than X unless they get the feedback of reality. So what was the outcome 3 months later, 6 months later?
Right.
And that's data. That's not something that somebody gets to go play with that, turn that data to their own means or into their belief system. That's the actual data from the result. They came back and said, guess what? That didn't work. And so,
what does work mean, though?
Yeah, the result that we predicted or prescribed did not occur. You took the prescription.
So let's use the prescription. It did what it was supposed to do, on
Do
a
more of
false
that.
positive, it says it worked, but then you say it doesn't make me feel like me anymore. I'm not going to do that. So that's a false positive, no?
Yeah, it is in that regard. I mean, I may have taken the analogy too far.
And I'm just playing ball here. So.
Yeah. But once you got the results, and whether those results are, hey, that didn't work out the way we thought it would, or it did, then those results getting fed back into the machine, they don't get tainted by somebody's belief. That's just the data. You know, they always say, hey, you can't really argue. I mean, you can argue with how the data was collected or correlated or what have you, but the data is the data, right? And to your point, statisticians can skew
I was
it in
going to say
different ways.
the data should be the data, but the data,
There's a lot of different ways to read it, right?
well, you can read it differently, you can display it differently, you can manipulate it differently, and so there's whole schools of science around manipulating data to make it say what you want.
Yeah.
And like, we're not talking politics here, but like if you turn on the news. You turn on one channel and they say the data says this. Turn on another channel, data says this.
Same data, different story.
Exactly. So when I'm thinking digital assistant, I'm like, well, you should be able to download like the version of the digital assistant that says what you want it to say. I don't know.
The in the bubble assistant and the rebel assistant.
Yes, like this is the
It's like
punk rock
challenging
assistant.
you at every turn.
Now that is funny. Like that's an idea for reality.
With an attitude, the assistant with an attitude.
Yeah. And she just keeps popping your bubble every time you think you've got one. You're like, well, you probably want to consider these 4 factors. You're like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean,
You said the Yahoo wake word button or wake word, and last time I heard you say that you didn't close it. So, what should I do with this?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you know, at the end of the day, to your point, I mean, machines have a way of doing exactly what we tell them to do.
Yes.
Whereas humans are a whole other ball of wax, right?
Right.
So ultimately, no, we're not getting rid of the human instinct, the human ability to correlate and see factors that weren't fed to the machine, that the algorithms that they were fed did have a slant or a belief system embedded in them. Or even ultimately, even if everybody's using the same algorithm, they're visualized in completely different ways to meet completely different agendas.
Right.
That's never gonna change. And what we can do is improve on that and bring that down to a space that is not necessarily, you know, Tesla. It doesn't have to be Elon Musk with the, you know, as the only prescriptive, predictive, completely aware virtual assistant, right? Feeding that into the SMB space. Now, that may be a bit more than 20 years, but you're already seeing cracks at it. Even Gary Keller from KW. I mean, that's one of the things he was whispering about a week or so ago.
I have not heard this. Can you find this for us?
Yeah, is that he's going to have a virtual assistant called Kelly, who is going to be helping out every agent and helping to automate all the little tasks that they don't want to take care of, and recognizing that, like the scenario I gave you, hey, I saw you just wrapped up that meeting. How'd it go? Well, it looks like Lee's going to be, you know, on the fence another 6 months. Okay, I'll put him in a nurture mode, you know, and okay, cool. Then that's done. I'm on to my next appointment.
Yeah.
So Gary's kind of betting on that. He thinks that that's going to be the next thing. I don't know how close he is to it.
That is that's a tough nut to crack.
And ultimately, even something like that, you have to feed data from many different systems to be correlated to really get her the ability to then go start up that transaction in another system that isn't my CRM, or to put that lead into a nurture mode means she has to have some way of talking to that marketing automation system, right? So again, integration is at the foundation of every innovation that this industry and many other industries want.
Yeah. Well, Mike or Mac, you've proved your point. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Great to meet you.
Thanks.